The month of February in terms of gaming was a weird transitional one where I spent more time looking at my backlog wondering what I should probably get to playing or simply finish instead of actually playing video games. And while this month had many new releases ranging from Helldivers 2, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Pacific Drive, and the big end of the month release that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I only ended up picking a single new title for the month of February in the form of Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and we will talk about that game a little later in this video. For now, join me as I walk you through my month of February in gaming. The month started off strong as I was striding into February playing the roguelike city builder Against the Storm, which is one of my favorite games of 2023. So much so that in 2024, I'm still playing it. Granted, I did stop for a little bit there during the autumn, but I picked it back up in December of last year. So for the first week of February, I was still playing it and having fun catching up on the updated material that had been introduced since I last played. Mainly playing around with the ancient seals and challenging myself to go above the max that I had gone, which was Prestige 10 in terms of difficulty. So all in all, it was a good start to the month. But as February went on, I started to get that little bit of fatigue. I was getting a little bored as I had achieved most of the goals I had given for myself. And since I also had maxed out the tech tree, there wasn't much for me to do other than going for harder and harder seals, upping the difficulty, and challenging myself a little more. But all in all, I was lacking a clear next goal in the game, and it started to feel like I was simply going through the roguelike motions of starting a new colony / a new run just for the sake of filling my personal gaming time. That's when I started looking at the backlog of my games to see what I could play next. And that's when the trouble started. I wasn't really sure if I was craving another roguelike experience because I had a couple in my backlogs I hadn't explored deeply in the past, or just not at all, or a fun RPG experience as I hadn't played an RPG in a little bit. So I decided to split the difference and I installed one of each, and I let them fight to see who would win my heart. Enter both Chained Echoes and Loop Hero. Two very different experiences. First off, I started looping around in Loop Hero, pun fully intended, which I had first played back in 2022. And back then, and right now, still find the pixel art of this game absolutely stunning. While I remember having a lot of fun back then and a pretty fun memory of this roguelike game where the goal is simply to loop around this procedurally generated path where you accumulate resources that you're using to quite literally build the world back up. There are two choices ahead of you. Figure out when is the best time to just run and keep all the resources you've accumulated, or just have one more loop to fight your way to the big bad boss and see if you can beat him before he kills you. However, this time around, the novelty of this game wore off pretty quickly. Don't get me wrong, it's a great game and I had fun, but even with spacing it out between recording and editing session, it still didn't scratch the gaming itch I was feeling in that particular moment. Maybe it was the fact that I had played a roguelite for a few months just prior to that, and that had me not being able to stick with it this time around. It did fill up a little bit of my time before I ultimately decided to dive deeper in my next game, which, as previously mentioned, was Chained Echoes. This RPG has been in my library for a long time. I had played a bit of it when it was first released in late 2022, but due to other games releasing in January of 2023, mainly that being Fire Emblem Engage, I had to put Chained Echoes to the side and keep it for a rainy day. It just turns out that a rainy day was a full year later, it seems. And while it was interlaced with Loop Hero in terms of my playing time, so I wasn't able to fully focus on it, I can safely say that I will be keeping up with this game coming into March, as it did scratch that turn-based RPG itch that I had just fine. The music is fantastic, the visuals are drop dead gorgeous, and while the story hasn't fully grabbed me yet like I initially thought it would, because pairing mechs magic, and sword. Can never go wrong. I am entering a point of the plot where things are starting to pick up a little bit, so I guess I'll have to report back on my enjoyment of Chained Echoes next month, and to keep you all in the loop with my progress. Oh, and on the topic of Chained Echoes, the fact that it was made by one person to me is absolutely crazy, so major props to them, because this game is truly fun. So those are the gaming experiences that percolated most of my February. Mix that in with a little bit of Super Auto Pets here and there, which I still play from time to time, both on my computer and the very limited gaming time I allow myself on my phone. It's always a nice little thing to have in the back pocket, just when you need 20 minutes to kill on the go, in those rare cases where I'm in a waiting room on a bus or something like that. Shows you where my head was at in February, as despite having many options ahead of me in my gaming list, I couldn't stick to just one thing or two. I had to split my time between many things, but at the end of the month, I finally decided to start a game that I picked up earlier this month that came out this year, and was ready to dive in fully because I had been awaiting it for a long time, and the online reviews I saw just sold it even more for me, and that is Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. My time on it was very limited so far, as I decided to start it during the last week of the month, and I also would be playing it only during my Twitch streams, which happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I didn't get to spend a ton of time on it, only a few hours so far. But I can safely say I have been having a blast. I haven't had the chance to explore the harder late game quests, but the Monster Hunter like hub system with replacing weapons with characters with their own specific skills spoke to me on many different levels. I had played a lot of Monster Hunter Rise back when it was first released, and then again when it was re-released on the PC a year later, and playing Grand Blue made me realize how much I had missed this style of game where you have to fight tough monsters, and it's kind of a test of your skill and knowledge versus their very powerful attack and very deep health pools. The story of this game has been pretty good so far, as we embark on a classic tale of rescuing a friend who is actually some sort of being of power that this evil church wants to use for nefarious reasons. Very JRPG cliches here, but we love that. We really do love that. At least I do. And while a big part of the fun of this game has to do with adding new members to your squad from a very big list, I think the main cast of character has a really fun found family dynamic that I always tend to personally gravitate towards in any form of storytelling. With all that being said, I will award it my Game of the Month award, as I had a lot of fun in the very little time I had with it. February was pretty awkward, as I previously mentioned, but Grand Blue made a big impact late in the game, so I feel like it deserves this little bit of recognition. Little disclaimer before we proceed: as some of you may know, my other channel is entirely dedicated to Fire Emblem content, so it goes without saying that I played some of the games in that series, but for the purpose of keeping these videos varied and interesting, I will not be talking about Fire Emblem on this channel. So as February is behind us, March is looming ahead with a few releases I'm interested in checking out. Mainly Unicorn Overlord and Princess Peach Showtime. I unfortunately haven't had the time to check out Unicorn Overlord's demo, but I have heard a plethora of good things about it, making me want to pick it up eventually. It was initially not on my most anticipated games list, but the really good reviews I saw online really made it sneak its way in there, so eventually I will be picking it up. Princess Peach Showtime will probably be a day one buy for me, for the simple fact that both my significant other and I love to play Switch games on our downtime together, and she's just finished her current game, so it's a perfect timing for her. So I'll probably be spending more time watching her play than playing myself, but I'll probably be able to report back next month with some idea of it, maybe having played myself, just maybe secondhand watching the game, as I have multiple games to complete myself going into March, mainly Grand Blue Fantasy and Chained Echoes, as I will keep both of those games going into March. As for the big releases of February that I haven't talked about much, mainly the big elephant in the room that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This game is on my radar, but it will not be covered next month or even soon, as I have committed the cardinal gaming sin of having never played Final Fantasy VII in the first place. So I haven't played Remake, haven't played 7, and I want to play those before I get the Rebirth. of course. So while that game is always going to be on my radar, until I've done those experiences, I will probably not be talking about Rebirth at all. But who knows, maybe I'll play the original Final Fantasy VII at some point on this channel as a Let's Play, or over on Twitch. Who knows? My goal will simply to remain spoiler free from this game, because somehow I've done it. Somehow in over 20 years, more than 20 years, I've managed to stay spoiler free. So that's kind of my goal regarding this game. Remain spoiler free. Other than that, the other game that I've been keeping an eye on that came out in February is Pacific Drive. The gameplay I've seen of it has piqued my interest enough to put it pretty high up on my wish list. So depending if I can find some time to fit in another game in my rotation, we may end up talking about it next month. So these are my plans going forward. There is a lot that might show up next month in the video, or maybe I'll keep it really succinct to the 2 games I started this month and that I'm going to continue into next month. Maybe I'll find some space for other video games, but we'll see then and then. I guess you'll have to tune in next time to find out. But that covers my plan for March and how my February in gaming went. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and let me know what games you're planning to play as we enter March. And I hope to see you all next month. But for now, bye-bye.